A time travel romance, a spy thriller, a workplace comedy? Yes, I too just finished Kaliane Bradley's The Ministry of Time, and I'm here to share my quick thoughts and review of this book. So, hello, my name is Zach, and I'm a lifelong reader and lover of all things science fiction, fantasy, comics, manga, personal development, and everything in between, and focusing mostly on sci-fi fantasy. And this sort of blurs the line on the sci-fi fantasy being sci-fi because yes, it's time travel, but it, as the kind of blurb reads, it's a little more on interpersonal relationships than any actual science. So a little more on just the general fiction. And overall, I'm kind of mixed reviews on this book because it was okay, but it definitely isn't really a true science fiction book. It's just a regular kind of thriller romance with a splash of science fiction because there's a time travel element, and that doesn't really even play into the plot until way into the end of the book. So this book is primarily playing with the premise of a fish out of water, where our main character works for the Ministry of Time, which is actually a pretty cool concept, is that they work for the British Ministry of Time, and that kind of ministry. Shout out to like the Ministry of Sound, but no, it's the Ministry of Time, and they're the guardians of time travel technology and sort of, if you're familiar with Marvel Comics, guarding the sacred timeline in a way. So they have access to time travel, and it's the job of the ministry's agents to sort of reintegrate the time refugees, for lack of a better term. And that's the concept I found was really cool, that the author kind of plays with this idea that this fish out of water, they're kind of like a refugee in a sense. And this is sort of on the nose a bit because our main character has mixed heritage, where she's dealing with her own identity from a mixed race, and she's living in the UK where, you know, is she white? Is she Asian? She kind of passes for both. So she also deals with ideas of identity, and the character, her kind of ward in this, is a figure from the past, which has, again, trying to be too spoilery because part of the fun is kind of seeing this fish out of water interaction as our time traveler from the past is brought to the present and is dealing with some of the, of course, as a time travel book would be, this, all the newness of the modern world. And he's using his kind of outdated customs and mannerisms and dealing with life in the modern world and how that kind of clashes with who he is and his perceptions and how it was okay at the time for people to be like that. So there's a kind of bit of DI kind of angle to this, and not really DI, but just the acceptance and of who we are and everyone having different backgrounds. So I found that kind of concept interesting, but the book itself is just very, a little slower paced than I would have liked. Again, this isn't a swashbuckling time travel fantasy adventure. It is two people getting along in modern England and learning about each other both from a cultural and a temporal perspective as they deal with who they are as people raised by different time periods. So all that said, it's does pick up towards the very end, and I found the ending actually more interesting because it dealt with more of like what you would expect a traditional time travel heist caper to be, with a bit of twists and turns that maybe I should have saw coming, but it was pretty interesting. I like the ending, but the first kind of 3/4 of the book is a bit slow, but it's something I didn't drop. So it was, while being slow, it was something that did keep my interest enough to continue the book and get to the end, but just know that it does move pretty slow. So I liked those aspects at the end. I can kind of appreciate the kind of fish out of water. I keep saying that term, but that the way the cultural acceptance of the two, I think, was what the author did great. This idea of refugees, both kind of immigration or immigrants. They're immigrants both location-based, like our main female character, and they're temporally immigrants, like our male main character being out of time, but also out of culture, just as the culture moves over hundreds of years. But then towards the end, we do get some of the action hijinks and more of a spy thriller. So it does pay off the premise of being a spy thriller towards the end. I didn't see the workplace comedy because personally, I didn't think any of it was all that funny, with maybe the interactions between the other time immigrants. But to me, it wasn't like laugh out loud. Ho, ho, ho. That was a funny joke. So it wasn't cringy funny, but it wasn't really haha funny either. But overall, it was decent. I would probably give it like a 3.5 out of 5. That it was a solid read. I don't really know if I would put it like some lists I saw this on, like best science fiction book of the year, but maybe in the view that this is a very accessible science fiction book. It's not hard sci-fi. It's not, hits you with all these scientific numbers and math and all this other stuff that's going to get the reader lost. It just tells a story of two people at its heart, which is very accessible to the majority of just general interest readers. It's not going deep on the science of how the time travel eventually works. It's kind of just a MacGuffin given to you that, okay, they figured out time travel and here are the consequences of it. So pretty interesting, but again, not a highlight of the year for me so far, but I was glad I read it. So a solid 3.5 out of 5 for me. So thanks for watching this review of The Ministry of Time. Have a great day.